All right, welcome everyone to day 2 of FoodTreX Global. My name is Eric Wolf, and I am delighted to welcome you to the first session of today's summit. And speaking today about how food festivals can be used to create and reinforce local food systems, we have Tracy Berno, who is a professor in Auckland, New Zealand, and Gabby Levionnois, a chef and nonprofit activist in New Caledonia. I know, sorry, my French accent is not the best, but anyway. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Tracy and Gabby, and let you do your thing.
Great, thanks, Eric. And hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. And we're looking forward to sharing some of our thoughts about food festivals and food tourism in the Pacific with you. Just want to start out in a very, very Pacific way by acknowledging the people that have helped us get to where we are with this presentation. Gabby and I are the ones who are the face for it tonight, but like many things like this, we're actually standing on the shoulders and standing beside many of our friends who have helped us. So we just want to say thank you to our friends who have provided absolutely stunning photography for us for this presentation. One particular friend who's been a great friend, a chef, and a wonderful food tourist who's given us some feedback on our activities in the Pacific. And we just want to acknowledge our colleagues from the Pacific Food Lab here in New Zealand and also in New Caledonia, because without all of them, we wouldn't have anything to really talk to you tonight. So thanks to all of our friends. Now, we're going to be taking you on a journey to New Caledonia tonight. I know none of us can really travel anywhere in reality, so virtually we're going to take you to New Caledonia. And we have a bit of a story that we're going to tell tonight. And the story that we want to tell is about food festivals and what we see as their real potential. Food festivals are fairly common across the food tourism landscape. And I'm sure that all of us have been to them in many points of the world. But we see food festivals really quite differently. We see them beyond something that just generates revenue. We see them beyond something that's about destination images or destination marketing. What we want to challenge you with too, and I'm going to keep saying tonight because it's actually just after midnight in New Zealand, but what we want to challenge you with is reconceptualizing how you think of food festivals and what you think the foundations of food festivals are, and the sort of benefits that they can create beyond just the revenue streams and the destination marketing. So we're going to be doing that by a bit of a narrative and some stunning images of New Caledonia and how food has really started changing the landscape there in tourism. Now, it all comes down to a simple but really, really powerful idea that Gabby and I share. It's the idea that food is a powerful tool for change. And I'm actually a psychologist by training, and I've worked mainly in the area of development studies and development in the Pacific. But I now work in the area of food systems, and all of these things are related. And the common denominator for me, certainly with the work that I do with Gabby in the Pacific, is that food, it's so central to everything we are, our cultures, everything. It just creates such amazing opportunities for change and development. And this is something that can be done in many ways, but one of the ways is through tourism. And we'll be looking at food festivals in particular. Now, a couple years ago, the Eat Lancet report came out, and I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the Eat Lancet. It caused huge ripples around the world because people suddenly sat up and realized that food is an incredible challenge. And people, for the most part, a lot of people seem to be surprised with that idea. And for us, we thought it was absolutely fantastic that people around the world, multidisciplinary teams of people around the world were sitting up and taking notice of food as part of a larger system. We thought that was great. But personally, we weren't really surprised by it because for us, food has always been really important. We take a food-centric approach and we're very much systems thinkers. And so for us, we could see how food was at the center of a lot of problems, climate change, emissions, waste, all kinds of negative things, bad health outcomes. So if food is at the root cause of a lot of these problems, then the reverse of that, or the inverse of that, is that food should be central to solving those problems. And this is why we see food as an incredibly powerful tool for development. And in fact, we see a direct relationship between our relationships with the food system and the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we're not the only people that see. Muting.
Tracy, we've lost your sound. Could you unmute yourself? There we go. Oh.
No?
Yeah, we have you now.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
It looks like I'm going to have to sit here with my finger on the shift key because I don't know what's gone wrong with the Zoom. So if I'm at a funny angle, it's because I'm holding my finger on the shift key now and working my mouse with the other hand.
Okay, strange.
I hope I
Very
don't
strange.
have to do anything else. So I'll start with the sustainable development bit. We're not the only people that see food as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, SDG 2 is very, very food-centric, but we see beyond that. And in reality, we see that most of the Sustainable Development Goals have some relationship to food. And this is something that influenced Gabby and the team in New Caledonia to come up with this logo, which has food at the center and a fork as the tool, and it's surrounded by the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is how strongly we believe in these sorts of connections. Okay, I have to say, I've got the choice now of either holding the shift key so you can hear me, or holding the mouse and having the program do crazy things. I don't know what's going wrong.
Tracy,
Anyways,
sometimes the space bar will mute and unmute. Have you tried that?
That's what I'm doing. I'm holding on to the space bar, but it's forcing the slides to go ahead. So I'm not quite sure why that happened.
What about on the lower control panel where the little microphone is? Just try if it goes to no sound, just unclick it. You know what I'm saying?
It's not showing on mine that it's muting.
Okay. Could Gabby maybe run the slides for you?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know why that happened, but it seems to have taken care of itself.
Okay,
so
fantastic.
Anyways, hopefully I can pick up the train of thought. One of the ideas that Gabby and I share is this idea that chefs are ultimately the leader of food movements because they make so many decisions around food. And we're not the only ones that believe in that. There's the Chef's Manifesto, which is directly related to the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 2. And I just want to now talk a tiny bit about some of the outcomes that we saw in New Caledonia. And I know it's unusual to start with the outcomes and work backwards, but we really want you to get a sense of how different the way that we approached the food festivals was. Now, when most people think of a food festival, they tend to think of like a street fair, maybe some cooking demonstrations, tastings of local products and things like that. But the way that the food festivals in New Caledonia have been structured is that there's been three main themes. There's been working with the school canteens because the children are the food consumers and the future of food. And in New Caledonia, they're on the French canteen system where every child gets a hot lunch every day at school. So just as an indicator of how powerful this is, in a country that has just around 250,000 people, in just 4 days of the food festival that they held last year, 95% of the canteens were serving local foods, and that had a very significant impact. There was also the opportunity to highlight a lot of local products. And in New Caledonia, this is incredibly important because as a French territory, they have a very high proportion of foods imported from France, and the local foods tend to be considered not quite as good as the French imports. And so this was the opportunity to highlight producers and the local foods and engage people in cooking and eating them. And it was also an opportunity to partner with other organizations and to create networks that could really drive the movement around food. And just some of the qualitative outcomes that came out were people reporting that they saw strengthening of local food systems. There was a significant increase in the uptake of local foods. There was a significant reduction in food waste. There was the opportunity to enhance local biodiversity through promoting the local products, and partnerships and intersectoral linkages were forged. And probably one of the most important things for New Caledonia, particularly within the tourism context, is that there was a valorization of local foods. So as a result of the food festivals in New Caledonia, there was this very broad range of benefits and outputs related to sustainability and resilient food systems. And one of the things that we're really excited about is an official acknowledgement from Tourism New Caledonia. The food festival has been nominated for an award around sustainable events. So it's just a very tangible, very tangible indicator that by structuring and conceptualizing food festivals differently in New Caledonia, that it's actually having quite a significant impact around sustainability and sustainability indicators. So at this stage, I'm going to pass over to Gabby, who I hope doesn't have the same problems with the mute as I did. And he's going to tell us a bit of a story and a narrative around what's been happening with the food festival. So over to you, Gabby.
Thank you, Tracy. Hi, everyone, wherever you are in the world. I just want to say hi from New Caledonia, this beautiful little island. So I'm in the restaurant and we've just finished the service. So I'm a chef activist. And you see on that slide, I have other chefs around me. We created a task force in New Caledonia and in the South Pacific, so we can put our work and expertise to help the whole country to cook with local producers and use recipe. I created a concept called beneficial recipes. Basically, whatever we eat is transformed by a recipe. And if we manage to do a beneficial recipe, it will be beneficial for our local products, for our health, and for the next generations. So here you have a bunch of chefs. So we go around the country, wherever there is food to cook, food to eat, we will be there to see what recipes and local producers we can showcase through the food we provide. You really have to imagine that the whole country was beating at the heart of local food. And what happens during 15 days when everyone's cooking local food, canteens, restaurants, hotels, you name it. And it was such a huge experience because for once I had this impression that food was at the center of the country. So we will do our third food festival this year. And the funny part is now the producers are preparing. They're planting the food for the next 6 months for us to eat and to use at the local festival. We even take kids in the field so they can see where their vegetable will be planted and harvested for the food they will eat in the canteen. So yeah, imagine you're in your country, in your island, wherever you are in the world, and your community, your country, your tribe, your town is for 15 days putting local producers on the plate and celebrating. So it's, I would say, more a food culture event. And when we talk about culture, we talk about people. We talk about ourselves and our community. And that's where in New Caledonia it starts. In the South Pacific, you need to start from ground level. If you want people to follow the food festival, you have to start with their belly button. You really have to start with the stomach, and that's what we do. I must say that in New Caledonia, the whole civilization is built around yam. Yam is like, for people who don't know, is a sacred potato that has been traveling around the South Pacific. And it's one of the products that is helping the community to survive as well, you know? So it's a very, very important, it's not only food, but it's sacred food. So here is the Kanaks who were there before the white people arrived, have been celebrating yam every year. And we made sure that when we created the food festival, it was tuned with this local celebration. So this guy is taking tourists on this beautiful island in Isle of Pine is just amazing. And we were helping him to prepare food for the tourists that he takes to these islands. And his company is called Mana Nautic. And mana in the South Pacific means energy. But energy would translate in the power of transformation. The power, can you hear me, Tracy? The power of metamorphosis. What will trigger the great transformation that we need? And mana is all about how can we transform our food system for the great common good. So this is me with other chefs going in a resort and having the whole team, the chef's team around to co-create beneficial recipes with them for the tourists. So basically, we try to see what other type of recipes we can use, healthy recipes, because we consider that if we want to take care of the tourists, we need to take care of ourselves as well. The food that we eat, the food that we provide has to be healthier and use local products as much as possible. So you have one chef from Tahiti, you have a few chefs from all around the South Pacific that I invited, and I created a symposium called Pacific Food Connection. And I'm asking help from other chefs from other food culture to come and co-create our food culture in Caledonia. Because I believe as a chef activist, we need to improve our food culture, not only in restaurants, but in houses and communities and tribes. And of course, kids are the first guest of the local food festival. They are the most important people. And we are actually doing that food festival for them. Because it's going to take, I reckon, 10 years to come to a level that the whole country really binds into it. So it's a nudge. We're starting one step after another. And our chefs, within this local food event, we want to empower local communities to be proud of the food that they are providing, especially for the tourists. So we have a Michelin star chef here, and on the right is Marc Depasorio, and actually he's a friend of Tracy now, and he's holding a restaurant back in Auckland. And here we are in a canteen, and in the French territory, a canteen is a place that kids go to eat at lunch, you know? And you're talking about 22% of the population. The population is eating in the restaurant.
Gabby, you froze.
Yeah, Gabby's frozen. So I guess I'll pick up from here while hopefully Gabby unfreezes. it was the opportunity to bring all of these different
Great thing
foods.
about being a chef
good.
is you bring smile into people's face, you know, and they can eat the food that you provide, but you can see happiness that you bring. So doing a local food festival basically is bringing happiness into the country. When you're happy, then you go and you are more motivated to and you comprehend the importance of eating better food and providing better food. Oh, I think I got carried away again. You know, food is something that I'm so passionate about. And when you start sharing your love of food, something will happen. Something will happen. And I think food for me is the quickest way to someone's heart, to someone's stomach, to someone's spirit. And when you're a chef, you can go around the world and you will always be welcome because you can cook. And that's the power that I'm using to participate for the great common good in my country. But I want to be a changing actor, stakeholder in the world as well. And I really hope with the eater and the feeder that we find a balance, we find a common path towards a more sustainable food system.
So the food, sorry, go on, Gabby.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to show you a scene in the restaurant. So these are the two chefs of the restaurant and the head chefs. And we are a team of 3 head chefs. I go outside and take care of all the work with the NGO, but they stay here. And it's Friday night. They've been cooking up a storm at the restaurant. And we did a pretty good service. 80 customers came. So we are very used to provide many meals. And I don't know if some chefs are listening tonight, but chefs, I really hope you find and that you are cooking good food for your guests. And I just wanted to say hi to my colleague chefs. And not only I'm on the Feed the Planet program for World Chefs, which is a huge organization of 8 million chefs around the world, and following as well the SDG through Chefs Manifesto. So that's the scene behind of chefs, you know, talking about the menu with local producers they will provide for tomorrow night.
And when you take these sorts of ideas and you turn them into a festival that celebrates the food and you engage this very, very broad range of stakeholders, it's something that starts, it's not just a one-off, it's not just a street fair, it's not just a few days of festival. It actually starts to create a movement and starts to really put a very, very strong message behind the power of food and enhance those sustainability outcomes. So it really is about food as a very, very powerful agent for change, and by creating this sort of multifaceted food festival experience, it just does create these opportunities for a broader range of benefits. So as we started out at the beginning saying, most food festivals really focus on revenue streams and destination branding and marketing. But for us, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Of course, it's really important within tourism, those sorts of aspects of a food festival. But in the Pacific, when you take it from a Pacific heart that starts with the culture, that starts with concepts like mana in the Pacific, or what we call in New Zealand, manakitanga, which is a very, very deep sense of reciprocal hospitality. You engage people in a really, really different way with the food and the meaning. And in that way, it goes beyond just the festival and starts actually addressing these issues through the food system and valorizes the food. And it becomes almost a virtuous cycle that then helps create that resilience within the food system. And it's something that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily connect with a food festival, but we see that direct relationship through the way that we see the role of food in society. You want to add to that, Gabby?
Oh, yes, you're right. I'm trying to convince my government that they're supporting us, but at the moment they can't really see how important the food culture is. You know, and that's why we need scientists to come and help us from overseas, and tourists to tell our local people that, listen, this is so important that all the islands of the South Pacific come together to celebrate their food. You know, we have to remember that in Caledonia we're eating 85% of imported food, which is completely crazy. And I can't hold this anymore. I have a restaurant, we're using at least 80% of local producers in the plates. And during this local food festival, my dream was that the whole country looked like the dining room of the restaurant, where we are providing 80% of local producers, you know. But my biggest dream, my big ambition is that we can go around the islands of the South Pacific and do food festival and basically do a South Pacific tour food festival. How would it be, Tracy, that we all go on a trip and travel to see what others are doing and like cross-pollinating our food culture? And I think that's what we need with tourism. Tourism is helping us to open our possibilities. When we open our boundaries, our table, our plates, our food culture, then we will get stronger. Our food culture will get stronger. So I don't see tourists when they come to the restaurant as only a revenue. I see them as a possibility to improve what we are doing, because it's the only way when you start crossing blood that basically you will be empowered, you will increase your genetic, you will increase your possibilities. So yeah, that's my dream. And I want to go and help other countries to set up their local food festival, starting with New Zealand, then going to Fiji, going to Tonga. And basically when you see all these smiley faces, and Swane, especially who is working with Tracy at a university now. Swane is a fantastic Tongan chef that I really love. And this chef now wants to do a local food festival in Tonga, back in his hometown, his home country, because I think he wants to save lives. Too many people are dying from diabetes, of poor health problems. And the food that we provide for tourists is the food that we should be eating in our own country.
Yeah, so that sort of takes a lot of the ideas that we're working with, all the way from using food as a tool for development, chefs as the real agents of change through their power at making decisions around food, the combination of science and practice to bring it all together, and then putting it within our basket of Pacific culture and sharing it across the region, because that's what we do in the Pacific. So that brings us pretty much to the end of what we wanted to talk about. Hopefully it's challenged some of your ideas around food festivals and what's possible. And thank you for your patience with the technological problem at the beginning. And we certainly welcome any questions that you might have about the approach that we're taking here in the Pacific and in New Caledonia. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for giving us a chance to meet you and to have a word about our country. Thank you, Eric. You've been really a great help. You know, little islands like us, sometimes we have difficulty with technology, but you really facilitated this conference as a speaker for both me and Tracy. So yeah, it's fantastic. And you will be our first guest to Local Food Festival, Eric. Come and you will be my guest at the restaurant, and I can take you around New Caledonia. And when you leave the country, you will want to come back, not only to eat the great food, but to meet these beautiful people that we have here again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gabby. And looking at those pictures of all the fresh foods and the fresh fruits, it looks just delightful. Exactly the kind of thing I love. So I look forward to it. And I'd like to thank both of you for sharing your knowledge. New Caledonia is a country I have not visited, and I really relied on both of you to share your expertise here. And Tracy, having lived in New Zealand, I know how important the deference to the local cultures is, especially in New Zealand, but also in the surrounding islands. And I would just like to acknowledge that you took the time to acknowledge the local peoples and their influence and their contribution to your presentation. I think that was a very forward thinking and very timely approach. So I think that was great. Thank you for doing that. So what are some of the obstacles that you faced trying to implement the food festival and changing the local people's ways of thinking?
Okay, that's really a huge question for Gabby, and we'll have to be careful because that could be a very, very long answer, because there's been a lot of obstacles trying to get this off the ground in New Caledonia. So, yep, Gabby, over to you.
Oh yeah, obstacle. I don't look at obstacles, you know. We chefs are used to have obstacles all the time. So no, we are searching for people to enjoy the food that we provide. Basically, the best way not to have obstacles is to provide great food and to tell the story around it. Whenever you speak about food and food culture, people recognize themselves and they feel that someone is listening, someone is paying attention, someone cares. When you provide food to someone, he gets this feeling, this sensation that someone is taking care of him and the obstacles are not here anymore. So yeah, of course, when you want to make a shift, a huge shift that we need, a metamorphosis, some people are afraid. So they are out of the comfort zone. And we trying to find in the leadership that we are using, participatory leadership that we're using within the NGOs we're running with Tracy, we want to take people from the non-comfort zone to the magic zone. This magic zone is where great common good is happening, when people are happy, when they have fear, when they meet at the table and they start to have conversation that makes sense. So that's what we want to do, you know. And when people are eating, they're not at war anymore. And in New Caledonia, food is more important than war. Conflict is always obstacle. Conflicts will always calm down when food is on the table.
Someone made a reference to quote yesterday about how you can't fight if you're busy with food in your mouth or something like that. And I think that's great. It's something that we should all live by, keep everybody fed and happy. I've always joked that we should put all the world's leaders into a hotel ballroom and give them plenty of food and drink and lock the doors and come back in a week. And we would either have world peace or they would kill each other. So
Castro diplomacy.
Something like that. So the next question
Eric,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Elders in New Caledonia are saying that obstacles are an invitation to innovation.
Mm.
Elders, yeah.
I like
Wisdom,
that.
elders, yeah. Invitation to innovation.
And problems is just another word for opportunities.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so the next question has to do with measuring your successes. And this also ties into another question from one of our delegates. So measuring your successes, but also how have the food producers had enjoyed a positive economic impact through these festivals? How are you measuring that?
Sure, yeah, it's a question. Today,
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Maybe if we turn off Gabby's video.
Yeah.
Oh,
before. And that's what's so important about the food festival. So basically today, the phone call, we had someone that is now providing most of the canteens with local producers that he shreds. So he prepares local producers so it's easier for the chefs to use. And so he was saying that now his business is up and running fine and he's making good money, you know, because he's selling all the good stuff and he's transforming sometimes the vegetables that are too big to be on the market. So maybe that's one tangible that I could tell you, that I think he's providing at least 50 canteens in the whole country. So you're talking probably like 30,000 kids. And that's pretty amazing. And I'm not talking about all the fishermen. We have an amazing fishery here. And we created the fish sausage for the kids. And now I think the last service with fish sausage was, I think, 48,000 sausages that was provided in one day for the canteens. I have so many other figures, but I can tell you that it is a fantastic structure to the food chain. You know, then the food chain knows what it has to supply. Mm-hmm. And when you co-create the menu with your producer, it's much easier because then you adapt to your climate, you adapt to your season, and you adapt to the constraint of the local producers. So yeah, figures. There's so many indicators that we put on because we want to make sure that there are measurables. What we do, that we can put a number, and that's how we convince our government. Whatever you do, you need an indicator to tell that it's powerful, it has a local impact.
So in addition to the 50,000 saucissons de poisson, yeah. That's fish sausages for everyone else. Are there, what you talked about these indicators, so can you tell us any percentages like well, you had mentioned earlier that the percentage of consumed food in New Caledonia was 85% imported. Has that fallen, for example? Do you know that statistic?
Yes. No, I don't know the statistic, and that's why we need scientists to come and help us with the local food festival. That's the whole idea of binding science into a food festival. Of course, we know what impact we can have, but we need the scientists to come and help us. We need help as chefs, as practitioners, to have a better understanding of what we're doing and the impact we are having. But you know, our chefs, we act first, and then we measure later. We need to go into action. The Eat Lancet report is now saying that we know enough. We know that we need to change our food behavior, our food system. So I just want to grab a knife and cook the hell out of our local producers and make sure that, you know, the kids are eating better food in the country. Until I die, Eric, till I die, I will be there behind our government to make sure that they put the food in the center of the house, not outside as a functional thing to deal with. So indicators, Tracy, the science community, the academics, please come on an operational level with us to measure, because I'm sure we're having an impact. And we could go from 85.
That was the plan.
Yeah, 85%.
I was supposed to be in New Caledonia doing some research last April, but we went into lockdown about 3 weeks before I was meant to leave. So part of the reason that Gabby and I work together is I'm one of the people that contributes to the science side. But unfortunately, with the current travel restrictions, it's limited somewhat what we can do in terms of collaborating around things like that.
Well, Tracy, I think it's an opportunity for maybe some of your students for internships, right? Field trip.
As long as I get to lead it.
There you go. There you go. All right, we have a couple more questions here. The next question is, yesterday in a session, we heard about how some islands, notably Fiji, tend to cater to Western demands in terms of the menus that they offer for tourists, especially in hotels. How do we encourage a holistic approach to change tourist attitudes to try indigenous foods and chefs that have the confidence to promote local dishes?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've done research in Fiji for the past 20 plus years around this very area, and I'm partway through a project at the moment looking at tourist food preferences in Fiji. But since there's no tourists in Fiji, that's a project that's also on hold. But what we found was that a lot of the tourists had very little idea of what Fijian food was, and a lot of them are what we would describe as on the neophobic to neophilic scale, you know, whether they're risk takers or whether they're quite conservative. The majority of tourists that we talked to were either quite conservative around their food choices or sat somewhere close to middle. So a lot of them weren't really prepared to try Fijian food unless it somehow looked familiar. So what started to emerge from the data is the real importance of telling the story about the food and letting people have the opportunity to try it with a bit of knowledge wrapped around it. And that would make it more likely that they try the local foods. But I think it has to be done gradually. And what was also coming out is it might be not putting full plates of Fijian cuisine in front of people, but gradually substituting local ingredients in Western dishes, and then gradually nudging people towards trying the Fijian cuisine.
Yeah, that was discussed yesterday to substitute some of those ingredients, but also Gabriel Levionnois was the speaker there, and he was saying that the service staff was probably the weakest link because they were not selling the notion of local foods to consumers, to the tourists. So they basically needed the waiters and waitresses to say, you know, oh, it tastes like this, or oh, it's kind of like a Fijian pizza, right? Just to put it in a familiar context so people would be less scared to try something that they probably would actually like.
That's basically what we found as well. And I mean, I know Gabriel, and we've had conversations around this. It's learning how to tell that story. Yeah. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
And if I can add something, not only about telling the story, but I've been doing some training, chefs training around the South Pacific, and especially in Fiji. And our chefs, we can be ambassadors as well and go and help these little resorts, starting from their local producers to bind, to make a link, to bridge with other food culture. So basically, when we do our training, we start to explain and ask questions about the other one's food culture. What does he need? What does he want? And what can we provide? And what is the great recipe that we can create between these two? And sometimes when I was providing the training, I invited the tourists to come and co-create recipes with us. And it was so funny to see them eat at lunchtime the food that with the recipe they had co-created with us in the morning and the stakeholders. So basically, how do we bridge? How do we start this conversation? And the elders here in New Caledonia are saying that Western world and the local world have not met yet. I think we have to start from, how about we take many tourists and local food suppliers and chefs to co-create this food culture. And then you have the concept of the local food festival. So the local food festival is a bridge between our food culture and your food culture. And then it becomes my food culture. So it's still very new that people arrived here. And my ancestors, because I'm half Tahitian, never saw any white people 100 years ago. So please, guys, we still have, to understand and start this conversation around food that matters.
Indeed.
We need some time, and I think all the hotels and all the industry has to open spaces that we can have this conversation and create these recipes and this food culture.
Okay, last question before we wrap up. And Tracy, would you like to stop sharing your screen so we can have a good look at everybody's faces? The last question is, it's great to learn about the food festival work with school kids. Are there other related food education programs offered during the food festivals?
Oh, yes, of course. We have started a project that it's called Eat Well, Be Well. And this project starts with sense. What is your capacity to sense food, to enter into relationship with food? How do you taste? How do you smell? How do you see? What is your perception of food? And of course, we have launched this project, and whatever projects we've been doing with Pacific Food Lab and Pacific Food Lab New Zealand, we are basically prototyping. We are putting the projects into action as a prototype, because it always starts with a mouth bite. It starts with one step, you know. So the education around food is helping the kids to improve their capacity to taste first. When they have the vocabulary, when they can sit at the table and start enjoying their food, then you start explaining what's behind, what's beyond. So yeah, the educational program is called Eat Well, Be Well, and we have trained a few teachers, and we're starting to put this into school with cooking classes as well. So yeah, it's very important. I think it's the beginning. At the beginning of the shift and the transition, and then start with the mouth bite, the capacity of the kids to bite not only into food but into life.
I think that's brilliant. Everything starts with youth, and that's how we're going to have sustainable change. So it's not a quick solution. It's going to take 20 or 30 years, but when those kids become adults, then they have those new values, and hopefully they will teach those values to their kids. Well, we need to wrap up, but I would like to thank both of you, especially not just for sharing your knowledge, but for staying up so late, your time. We really appreciate it. Really interesting presentation. And Tracy, I'm sure maybe I'll see you in New Zealand another time, but Gabri, definitely will see you in New Caledonia for sure. It's on my top 10 list now. Places I have to go to next year when we can travel again. So thank you again, and wish you all the best and stay safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
too.
to everyone. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, everyone, we will see